light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. Trying to figure out where to begin at the moment is, and I suppose for a lot of people, at least within the present time, there's a lot of confusion and chaos and trying to figure out what is the right way to proceed. And the topic I had chosen was to what extent one's life experience follows one's philosophy. And because I have met people in various religious groups who will believe something and it seems like everything follows their belief somehow. And yet when they try to exercise that belief consciously and directly, it doesn't always happen. As an interfaith minister, I often tell people that I do believe that miracles still happen, I just don't believe that they're predictable. In a similar sort of way, I was in a discussion with some professors recently about a particular kind of assignment for my doctoral studies. And the suggestion was that each person is supposed to identify the sources or the literary texts that made them what they are today. And I kind of thought, in talking with one professor, I said it doesn't really make sense, because if I take all the books that influenced me and told someone to read them, they wouldn't wind up with the same person that I am, because each person would have their own unique reaction and remember different portions. And so what I suggested to this professor was that the books I've read are empowering, but they're not directive. They don't tell you specifically what is going to happen or who you're going to be, but they are books that I have found empowering in the sense that they provide inspiration and insight and ways of looking at things that perhaps I didn't find in other places. And I'm wondering if that applies to a lot of other things as well, that philosophies are empowering, but they're not necessarily directive, because it still depends upon how you respond and what you do with the information that you're given, or what one does with the information they're given. What I did with the information clearly is much different than what other people would do, because with my autistic attention to detail, I would interpret things and notice things in a very different way. The challenge that I often wrestle with in being a unique individual, and on one hand recognizing that every individual is unique, that just as there are no two snowflakes exactly alike, there are no two people who are exactly alike. Even if you're the grandson of somebody and you look the same, it still comes down to an entirely different way of interacting with life because of the ways you interpret and the ways that you use language and the historical influences that you have that your grandfather didn't have or your grandmother didn't have, and the ways that alters how you respond. And so every person is absolutely unique, and yet I am very impressed with the African word Ubuntu, essentially translated as I am because we are, and we are because I am. That there is this symbiotic relationship between individuality and community that somehow transcends philosophies, that within every philosophy and spiritual approach and theological path, there is this sense in which there is relationship going on, a relationship occurring. There is some way that a particular kind of individuality is providing a sort of renewal and insight and empowerment to the community. And there is a way that the community is providing a sort of protective sphere in which the individual can grow and develop and learn and become. I don't know how many people speak of the process of becoming anymore, or look at their lives as a whole collective experience that is creating something. At least we hope is creating something. I know of people who spend their entire lives and have all sorts of resources and yet they never invest themselves in learning or becoming anything. And it's very sad to see such a waste of resources, because when they are gone, there is nothing to testify that they were ever here, nor did they make the world better in any way, shape, or form. And the problem with that is that it winds up being a wasted life. You have this time, you have these resources, and you simply didn't use them because it was too much work or it wasn't convenient or something. As Sister Who, I have always been enamored with meaning, and on one hand, I don't want to insist that everyone else is enamored of meaning, but I don't see spending one's life in purely narcissistic ways and spending one's resources in purely narcissistic ways. No matter how you slice it, or whatever metaphor you want to use, life involves struggle. And even the person who has everything provided for them will still struggle for a sense of purpose, and will still struggle at some point with why they do what they do. And why am I doing this? And why am I making an effort? If I'm making no effort at all, in what sense am I truly even alive? And if I'm not living, what am I doing here? I'm wasting the time. I have this amount of time for my physical life. It only makes sense to do something beautiful and good and genuine and meaningful with it. Otherwise, it is completely a waste, and I don't want my name to be associated with being a waste. And so, as Sister Who, even before I became Sister Who, very early in life, I would look at the resources and the opportunities available, and I would try to figure out what is the most that can be done with these. And of course, that is guided by the particular philosophy that I held at the moment. What makes something meaningful? And the thing I keep coming back to, or the conclusion I keep coming back to again and again, is that what makes life meaningful is the love and the wisdom and the kindness that one imparts to it, invests in it, or accumulates during it. That while you are living your life, you are learning and you are growing and you are accumulating wisdom. And rather than just take it all with you and have it go no further than your own mind, to somehow take that wisdom and the beauty that you have been able to create and make it something that lasts longer than you will ever be here. Something that can be read or seen or studied or viewed or something long after you're gone, because it is so possible to spend the moments of one's life creating something that is far more enduring than the life itself. The statue of David is still around and can still be viewed in spite of the fact that Michelangelo has been gone a very long time. And the drawings and the ideas and the conceptions of Leonardo da Vinci are still here with us, even though he has been gone for a very long time. And George Washington, being the first president of the United States, that on one hand, in submitting to the medical system of his day, they literally bled him to death, which is a horrific thing to say, that would happen to the first president of the United States, except that at that time, no one believed any different. And so he didn't know any better, so he submitted himself to what is now regarded as really, really erroneous medical thinking. At the time, it was considered the state of the art, the only correct answer. And he was, the thing I also love about George Washington, I was told, was that he wanted the presidency of the United States to be a volunteer position, that he really believed it was about public service, not about self-aggrandizement or narcissism. It wasn't about whatever wealth he accumulated. It was about doing the best that he could do for the world around him and making a positive contribution to the world around him. I thought it was very interesting in trying to discern or decide the measure of a life. In the movie Star Trek Generations, Captain Picard and William Shatner, Captain Kirk, are fighting this particular adversary together because neither one of them can win the battle fighting all alone. So they have to collaborate. And how they do that collaboration is very complicated. But when it comes down to the end, where William Shatner, or excuse me, Captain Kirk, has given his life, and the last thing he says to Captain Jean-Luc Picard is the question, did we make a difference? Because if we made a difference, that to him equated to success. And the question applying it to myself, the question would be phrased as, did Sister Who make a difference? Was Sister Who a success? And it depends so much on how you define the word success. And what measures success? Is it the number of shows? Is it the volume of the audience? Is it how much money you made doing it? Again and again, I keep saying, when money becomes the measure, community always suffers, and in this case as well. And people have asked me over the last 30 years, how do I know that being Sister Who was successful? And the thing I have to point to is the framed quotes from viewers that I have hanging up and down my hallway, on my staircase, that they literally cover one entire wall and most of another. There have been so many comments and responses of the difference that Sister Who made in someone's life. Something I said in the show that I had no idea at the time would be quite so pivotal for somebody watching. And those people really are the reasons that I keep doing the work. And it's not how many of them there are or how much money they send in or anything like that. If you want to see whether or not Sister Who has been successful, you need to look at what difference have I made in those people's lives. It kind of comes down to that same question, like Captain Kirk in that movie Star Trek Generations, asking, did we make a difference? And if I made a difference, that will be the measure of what Sister Who has done or has not done on Earth. That it's not some self-serving donning of ritual garb and being theatrical and, gee, I made all these shows, isn't that impressive? Or I climbed all these mountains, isn't that impressive? No, that's all well and good, and I'm glad I did. But the point is that while doing those things, I made personal contacts that made a difference in someone's life. And by making these videos and distributing them literally internationally through the internet, and having people write back and say, this made a difference in my life, and I would very humbly and gratefully say to them, you are the measure of how much or how little this work has succeeded. Whatever you do with your life, if I have somehow empowered you to be a better person, then somehow it's got to all be worth it. And in that movie, when Captain Kirk was dying, and all he wanted to know was, did we make a difference? Because if he made a positive difference, then somehow his sacrifice would be absolutely worth it. And whatever I have sacrificed to be Sister Who for the last 30 years will be absolutely worth it if there are people who can say, my life is better, richer, deeper, broader, more wonderful because of something that Sister Who has provided. That is the measure of my success. It doesn't come from me. It comes from them, whether I made a difference. And so in that sense, in looking at philosophies and theologies, I try to evaluate them and see how they work and what works and what doesn't, and how true are they or how false are they. And in all of this to say, does it make a difference? There was a previous episode in which I made the comment, I'll try to remember it here. It was something to the effect of, I have no judgment about which religious path or which spiritual system you follow, what philosophy you follow. But the point to me was that if it's not helping you be a wiser and more loving person, I think you're doing it wrong. Because that's what every philosophy and spirituality is ultimately intended to do, to make you a wiser and more loving person. And if it's not doing that, whether it's atheism or Islam or Christianity or Judaism or neo-paganism or whatever, if it's not making you a wiser and more loving person, Why are you making the investment of yourself in your time, your creativity, your energy? Why are you giving it any thought? I was going to say, why are you being dedicated to it? But that becomes an ongoing question also of just how dedicated I am to what I claim to believe. And that's where I have often said, if you don't believe it enough to do it, then I'm not sure if you really believe it at all. Thinking about what you believe and its effect upon your life and its effect upon your relationships with others and even your relationship with yourself. The thing to remember about Narcissus in the original Greek myth was that he didn't really even have a relationship with himself. He was staring at nothing more than his reflection, a thin visual perception on the surface of water, and he wasn't looking at anything of any substance. And so he didn't even have a relationship with the substance of himself. And somehow he found that perception so engrossing that he kept staring at it until he died. And in a similar sort of way, I find people in the current time in which I live who have become so fascinated by computers or ideas or experiences or having the biggest house and the best car and the most luxurious, expensive clothes. And none of that matters in the end because none of it follows them to the cemetery or to the crematorium, whichever it may be. And once they are gone, those things are divided among other people who want to possess them, and they are quickly forgotten. And one would have to wonder if it mattered that they were here at all. I would like it to matter that I was here. And Captain Kirk in the movie Star Trek Generations wanted it to matter that he was there. And maybe he didn't survive that fight, but he invested himself, his time, his energy, his determination, his beliefs, his belief in life. And when all was said and done, all he wanted to know was, did I succeed in making a difference? And so in that sense, if your philosophy is not encouraging you to make a difference, if your philosophy is no more than eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, I suggest that when you die, your possessions will be redistributed, and everyone will be in a hurry to forget that you were ever here. I remember reading someplace once that people will not remember so much what you said as they will remember how you made them feel. And in that sense, it's not the words that I say that matter, because it could be translated into different languages and use different words. It's the meanings and the feelings and the insights and the inspiration that I can provide. If there is any inspiration I can provide that helps you be a wiser and more loving person, then I would like to think that I did something right. Without knowing that, however, I have to go on living my life each and every day in not knowing, within a context of not knowing. Did I do something right? I know I did my best, but I don't know whether or not I did something right. And whether or not I did something right depends upon the perspective, because there are certainly people who will insist that everything I did was wrong, that being gay was wrong, that dressing in a skirt was wrong, that putting on whiteface was wrong. They will, and it's really not about right or wrong in the higher sense of the word. It's about whether or not they personally disagree with the choices and the creative manifestations that I made. And I guess with all of that in mind, there's still this additional possibility that I've mentioned on other occasions, that I may be creating for a generation that has not yet been born. If the people who are going to appreciate Sister Who are going to be born 50 years after I die, and they will hang on every word and celebrate everything that I shared and use my wisdom as something upon which to build their own and go even further and come up with discoveries and creativity that I haven't even imagined, because they will have evolved the work so far that they will go beyond me. They will be the next chapter after me, doing greater things than I ever imagined. And if I'm creating for that generation and not for my own, I need to be dutiful in my work whether or not anyone pays attention, whether or not anyone listens, whether or not anyone gives me a dime for what I do. Money is not the measure of what I do. Love is the measure. Wisdom is the measure. Self-development is the measure. Becoming the most that this particular individual can be. And I don't know why it would be any different for anyone else. That in every case, it's the individuality of you that makes the difference. And what the world needs, but may not always request, is the uniqueness that is you. There is a reason you have been born and you live in this time and place. And just because the person standing next to you or in front of you or all around you doesn't get it, doesn't mean there was a mistake made in having you live now in this way, understand in this way, perceive in this way, create in this particular way, whatever way it is that you create, whether it's writing or painting or music or auto mechanics or architecture, whatever it is, to do what only you can do because only you see and understand in the way that you do. And the philosophy that you use to inspire and empower yourself and guide yourself through all of that needs to be one of your choosing, and one not just of your choosing, but one that is also continuously evaluated and reevaluated, because the world around you will continue to change. And consequently, you and your philosophy and your emotions and your spirituality need to grow with it, becoming ever more than you have ever been, becoming someone that in childhood you never dreamed of being because you had no idea how far you could go. And I hope that something I've said in these shows allows you to go even further, to become something even greater. And all of that comes out of the uniqueness that you are, which is, there is no example of individuality that can survive without a constellation of relationships. And so what you are is a manifestation, but a particular manifestation of the intersection of your community and yourself, that your community grows and develops in the ways it does because you are being yourself and you're living with integrity. And because you're living with integrity, your community responds by supporting you and embracing you and nurturing you to be the best you can ever be. That's the ideal situation, though. In reality, there's a lot of us who are at odds with our communities because our communities haven't learned how to be good, effective, ideal communities. They are still learning and growing, and so we give them whatever inspiration and insight we can, trying to help them become better communities than they have ever been. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't, and sometimes we find that the community for whom we're writing or painting or creating is one that will not be born for another 50 to 100 years. And yet we still have to be faithful in doing our work because the people who come along at that point will absolutely depend upon our contribution, even if we're not there to give it in person. There is a lot of discovery and soul searching that goes on in being a truly committed individual. I remember hearing many years ago that this minister suggest as a challenge to his audience that God or the divine has not yet seen what can happen or what can be done through one person totally committed. And I heard that and I immediately thought, well, I guess I should be that person then. I don't know why anybody doesn't immediately try to be that person after such a statement, because it's inspirational, it's challenging, it's very direct, and yet there's a lot of wisdom that has to go into that, figuring out what is the right way to integrate the philosophy with the everyday relationships. with the communal relationships that surround me. And in that, to realize that it's not about becoming obsessed and becoming the leader of a cult like David Koresh or something like that. It's about presenting and creating and presenting and refining a concentration of truth and love and wisdom that is so challenging that it casts shame upon all of our existing duplicitous systems, all the political corruption, all the legal corruption, all the administrative corruption. All of those things specifically point away from truth, love, and beauty. Truth, love, and beauty, however, still has an opportunity to manifest and to become something that can be shared and seen through each of us. Through us, love and truth and beauty can become fully real in a way that it couldn't possibly do through anyone else. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that some of the things I've shared today have been helpful to you.
Thank you for joining us. And now may you be blessed with love and peace in the pursuit of your own dreams and in all your dealings with the diversity of humanity around you. Amen.